In a world where grades define everything, what is a child supposed to do when they feel like nothing more than a tool for their parents' pride? My parents only loved my grades, not me. Tells the story of a top student living under the shadow of expectations, who decides to give it all up in search of the unconditional love they've always longed for. This isn't just a story about family, it's a painful journey of rediscovering oneself. I would trade all my perfect grades just to hear my parents say, "Do you love us? You think I'm crazy?" Well, maybe I am. But it wasn't always like this. Not until I realized what was missing in my life. And it wasn't the certificates on the wall or the praise from teachers, it was something far more important, yet far more elusive. Imagine living in a house where your worth is measured by numbers on a paper. A house where your parents only smile when you bring home a gold medal. Where their pride is never in you, but in the achievements you can display for the world to see. It all started when I won my first national competition. I thought my parents would be proud, maybe even celebrate, but no. It was the same. The same cold acknowledgement, the same indifferent glance over a dinner plate. "Well, you should be getting used to this by now." That was the moment I realized. The moment I understood that for them, I wasn't their son. I was just a walking GPA. So, what do you do when you realize the people you love don't even love you back? When they only love what you can do for them? I did what no one expected. I left. And trust me, they didn't see it coming. I was born into a family that valued success over everything else. My father, a businessman, prided himself on being a self-made man. My mother, a respected doctor, found her self-worth in her career. Both of them had big dreams, and it seemed like I was the last piece they needed to complete their perfect puzzle. They always talked about their plans for me: top universities, impressive internships, prestigious jobs. And so, I tried to live up to those expectations. I worked hard, studied late into the night, made sure my grades were always perfect. Because what else was there? Growing up, I didn't realize how much their love was tied to the achievements I brought home. It wasn't until I was in high school that the weight of it all began to sink in. That year, I placed first in a national competition, a math competition that everyone in my school had their eyes on. It was my biggest accomplishment yet, and I thought it would make them proud. I thought I'd finally hear those words from my father, "I'm proud of you." But no, that wasn't what happened. I remember coming home after the award ceremony, clutching the gold medal in my hand, my heart racing, waiting for a reaction. My mom was in the kitchen, slicing vegetables. Dad was sitting in his favorite armchair, his eyes glued to the newspaper. I walked in, the medal gleaming in the light, and waited for them to look up. "Mom, Dad." "I won," I said, my voice shaky, trying to keep the excitement from leaking into my tone. Mom didn't even glance up. "That's nice, dear. You'll be needing that for your college application. The competition's good, but it's not everything." Dad put the paper down, but only for a moment. He looked at me, nodded, then went back to his reading. "Well, I'm sure it'll help with your future job prospects. Keep it up." No hug. No congratulations. Nothing. I stood there, feeling like the floor had just dropped from beneath me. "Isn't this what you wanted?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "Isn't this why you pushed me so hard? To make you proud?" My father looked up, his expression cold. "We want the best for you. Nothing more." And that was all. The conversation was over. And that's when it hit me. They didn't love me for me. They loved the idea of me, the perfect child who could bring home accolades and fulfill their dreams. But I wasn't real to them. I wasn't their son. I was a collection of achievements. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. I felt like I was suffocating. The weight of their expectations, the pressure to succeed, it was crushing me. And for what? So I could prove that I was worthy of their love? What kind of love was that? I thought about the other kids I knew. The ones whose parents told them they loved them just because. The ones who weren't defined by their grades, but by the fact that they were loved, unconditionally. I wondered what it would be like to experience that kind of love, where your worth wasn't measured by how well you performed. But that wasn't the life I had. I didn't know how to escape it. I was stuck in this cycle, this endless race to be the best, to meet their expectations. It felt like I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just the lack of affection that bothered me. It was the fact that they didn't understand. They didn't understand what I needed. They didn't understand how much I was hurting. One day, a few months later, I overheard a conversation between my parents. They were sitting in the living room, discussing my future again, more specifically, the scholarship opportunities that had opened up. They talked about the prestigious universities that were interested in me. It should have been a proud moment, but I just felt empty. My father said, "He has to get into the best school. Anything less is unacceptable." My mom agreed, her voice sharp. "He needs to focus on his studies, not his personal life. This is his future. He has no time to waste." They didn't even see me. They saw a future, a career, an opportunity to show off to their friends. But not once did they stop to ask how I was feeling, what I was struggling with, what I needed from them. I was just a tool for their ambitions. And that's when I made the decision. I would quit. I would leave this life behind. I didn't care about the scholarship anymore. I didn't care about their dreams for me. I just wanted to be seen, to be loved for who I was, not for what I could do. I didn't tell them right away. I wanted to see if they would notice. If they would even care enough to ask why I was slipping away from everything they had planned. But I knew they wouldn't. They were too caught up in their own world to see what was happening to me. I started failing my tests. I stopped turning in assignments. I stopped participating in class. They noticed, of course. The teachers called home, worried about my sudden decline. My parents were furious. One evening, after yet another argument about my grades, I told them. "I'm done," I said, the words falling heavy in the air. "I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not living for your expectations. I can't breathe in this house anymore." My father was furious. He shouted at me, called me irresponsible, a failure. My mother, though, she just stared at me. Her eyes were empty, like she had no idea who I was anymore. And that was when it clicked. They didn't know me. Not really. Not the way I needed them to. They didn't understand that what I needed most wasn't another gold medal or a perfect GPA. What I needed was to be loved for who I was, not for what I could achieve. That night, I packed my things. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay in this house any longer. Not with them. Not with the constant reminder that I wasn't enough as I was. I left. I wasn't sure what would come next, but I had to try something different. I had to find myself. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of everything. The beginning of a journey I would never have expected. And I wasn't ready for what came next. But sometimes, you have to walk away to find out who you really are. I left. That's what I told myself. I thought I'd be free. Free from the constant pressure, from the suffocating expectations. I didn't expect to feel like this, like I was drowning in my own choices. The streets were colder than I remembered. The city felt unfamiliar, even though I had grown up here. The towering buildings seemed to mock me, as if they were reminding me of how small I was in this vast world. What had I done? I had taken the most drastic step, but now, as the reality of my decision started to settle in, I began to question everything. I stayed with a friend for a while, but the guilt kept eating at me. I didn't know how to face my parents, how to explain that I wasn't running away, that I was only trying to find myself. But how could I explain something like that to people who had never seen me for who I truly was? I spent days wandering around the city, alone with my thoughts. It wasn't peaceful. It was torturous. Every corner I turned reminded me of something, some event, some place I had been with them, with my family. Every moment I spent away from home made me realize just how far I had drifted from the person I had once been. I thought I'd feel liberated, but all I felt was more lost than ever. I didn't know how to navigate this new life. I used to think that all I needed was time away from my parents, but now, the silence between us was deafening. They didn't even know where I was. They didn't even care. It was like I had vanished into thin air. And then the thoughts came, those terrible thoughts that I had tried to avoid. Maybe they were better off without me. Maybe they didn't even notice I was gone. That night, I sat in a park, staring at the stars, trying to make sense of my life. The sound of distant traffic was the only thing that broke the silence. I was on the verge of tears, but I refused to let them fall. How could I cry? How could I admit to myself that I wasn't okay? The next morning, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "Where are you? Your father is furious. Why are you doing this to us?" I stared at the message for what felt like hours. It wasn't a question about me, about how I was feeling, about whether I was okay. It wasn't a message that expressed concern or love. It was an accusation. She was angry. Angry that I wasn't living up to their expectations. Angry that I had let them down. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Because I realized something in that moment, they would never understand. They would never see the pain I was carrying. They would never see me as a person, just as a symbol of their dreams and ambitions. I felt the weight of their expectations like an anchor tied around my chest, pulling me down. But the worst part was that they didn't even know they were doing it. They thought they were doing what was best for me, but they had no idea how much it hurt. They didn't know that the love they gave me was conditional. And that was the hardest part of all. Days passed, and I started questioning my choices. Was I being selfish? Should I have gone back? What would I say? Would they forgive me? Then, something strange happened. I got a letter. It was from my father. The handwriting was neat, almost too perfect, like it had been carefully crafted to make sure nothing was out of place. "We want you to come back. Your mother is worried. We don't understand why you've chosen this path, but we want to help. Please come home." At first, I felt nothing. No excitement, no relief. Just emptiness. I had wanted this, right? To be seen, to be understood, to be loved. But this letter wasn't what I had hoped for. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an admission of guilt. It was just another attempt to make things go back to the way they were, as if nothing had changed. And that's when I realized something even more painful: they didn't care enough to change. They just wanted things to return to normal because it was easier for them. It was easier for them to pretend that I was okay, that everything was fine, as long as I was living up to their expectations. I couldn't go back to that life. Not like this. Not when the foundation of everything I had known was built on lies. I spent another week in the city. I met new people, some who were in similar situations, some who were completely different. But none of them had the answers I was looking for. None of them could tell me how to fix the damage that had been done. And then, one night, while walking aimlessly down the streets, I found myself in front of a small bookstore. The sign was faded, the windows dusted with grime, but something about it called to me. I stepped inside. The bookstore smelled like old paper and forgotten stories. It was small and quiet, the kind of place that felt like it was suspended in time. I wandered the aisles, picking up books I wasn't sure I needed, but as I was about to leave, a book caught my eye. It was a thick, leather-bound novel with no title on the spine. Something about it felt different, like it was meant for me. I opened the first page, and the words jumped out at me, speaking to a part of me that I had buried for so long. It was a story about someone who had walked away from their life to find themselves. A person who had learned that sometimes, in order to grow, you have to leave everything behind. I didn't know it then, but that book was going to be my turning point. It was the first time in weeks that I felt like someone understood me. And it was the first time I realized that maybe, just maybe, I could find my way out of this mess. But the question remained, could I ever go back home? Would they ever truly see me for who I was? I spent the following days lost in the pages of that book, feeling like I had found a lifeline in a world that seemed to be drowning me. The protagonist's journey mirrored my own in so many ways: the search for meaning, the desperate need for love and understanding, the decision to walk away from everything that had once defined them. It was the first time I didn't feel so alone. But even as the story gave me some solace, it didn't answer the question that had been gnawing at me: should I go back? The longer I stayed away, the more I realized that it wasn't just about getting away from them, from my parents. It wasn't just about escaping the suffocating expectations. It was about me trying to find myself, trying to carve out a life that had nothing to do with their ambitions. But the guilt lingered. My mother's message, my father's letter, both were waiting, pulling at me, reminding me of the family I had left behind. They weren't just expecting me to come back because I was their son. They were expecting me to return as the person they had shaped, the person they wanted me to be. But I wasn't that person anymore. I didn't know who I was, but I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't go back and pretend to be the same. One evening, as I sat in a small cafe, reading, I got a call. My heart dropped as I saw the caller ID. It was my mother. For a split second, I thought about ignoring it, but then I realized I couldn't keep running forever. I had to face this. I answered, my voice steady but unsure. "Hello?" Her voice was soft, almost tentative, like she was unsure of how to approach me. "Min, where are you? Your father and we're worried. We've been talking, and we think it's time to come home. We want to understand. We want to make this right." I could feel the years of silence between us in that one sentence. It was almost laughable. Now, after everything, they wanted to understand? They wanted to make it right? Make it right? I repeated, my voice quieter than I intended. "You never even asked me what was wrong in the first place. You never asked how I felt. You just kept pushing me to be the perfect version of yourself. And now, after everything, you think you can just fix it?" There was a long silence on the other end. I could feel her hesitation, the weight of the words she didn't know how to say. Finally, she spoke, and her voice cracked. "I didn't know how to show you that we loved you. We thought if we pushed you, if we made sure you were the best, that was how we could show you our love. We didn't know any other way. We didn't understand that you needed something more than just success. We're sorry, Min. Please, please come home." Her words hit me like a tidal wave, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to scream, to tell her everything I had been feeling, but I didn't know if I could. I didn't know if I could forgive them for the years of silence, for the years of feeling invisible in my own family. "I don't know if I can," I said quietly, my voice trembling for the first time. "I don't know if I can go back to the way things were. I don't know if I can live up to the person you want me to be anymore." There was another silence, but this time it wasn't heavy with guilt or anger. It was a pause, a space where neither of us knew what to say next. Finally, my mother spoke again, her voice small but full of something I hadn't heard from her in years: vulnerability. "I don't want you to be someone you're not. I just want you to be happy. I just want to see you be you." Her words were like a crack in a dam. I had spent so much time fighting against them, fighting against their love because I thought it was fake, that it wasn't real. But maybe, just maybe, it was. Maybe they didn't know how to love me the way I needed, but they did love me, just in their own way. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "I'll think about it," I said, though I didn't know what I was thinking. All I knew was that I couldn't decide right now. I couldn't go back just yet. I had to keep searching. After the call ended, I sat there in the cafe, staring at my phone, feeling a storm of emotions swirl inside me. The city outside was still as cold as ever, but for the first time, I felt a little lighter. I wasn't ready to go back. But I wasn't as angry anymore, either. The next day, I found myself at the bookstore again. I hadn't realized it at first, but I had been coming here for comfort, for answers, for something to hold on to. As I walked through the aisles, something caught my eye, a journal, empty pages waiting to be filled. It was the same kind of journal I had used in the past, the one I would pour my thoughts into when I didn't know who else to talk to. I picked it up, running my fingers over the leather cover. Maybe it was time to write my own story, one that wasn't dictated by their expectations, one that didn't depend on the approval of anyone else. I left the bookstore with the journal tucked under my arm, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe I didn't have all the answers yet, but I was starting to understand that it wasn't about finding the perfect answer. It was about finding myself, about taking back the pieces of me I had lost along the way. And maybe, just maybe, I would be ready to go home one day. But only if it was the home I wanted. Only if it was the home I could return to as the person I had become. But that wasn't a decision I could make today. Today, I would take it one step at a time. And that was enough. The days blurred together in a way that made everything feel both distant and immediate. I spent more time at the bookstore, devouring books that mirrored my own journey, and writing in my new journal whenever the emotions threatened to overwhelm me. The act of writing was like therapy, a way to untangle the mess inside my head, to give form to the chaos I had been living. But even as I poured my thoughts onto paper, there was a part of me that kept wondering, what now? The weight of my parents' expectations still loomed over me, even though I was thousands of miles away from home. My mother's words from the phone call echoed in my mind, "We just want you to be happy." Could I believe that? Could I trust that their love was real, that they hadn't just been trying to create a version of me that was more palatable for their lives? I wasn't sure. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how complicated everything was. It wasn't as simple as choosing to leave them behind. I didn't hate them. I didn't even think they were bad people. They were just lost. And in their way, they were trying to do what they thought was best for me. But I wasn't sure I could ever go back to the way things were. The past few weeks had opened my eyes to so much, and I couldn't erase that. I couldn't erase the fact that they had never truly seen me for who I was. I couldn't forget the years of feeling invisible, of living in their shadow, of being reduced to nothing more than a tool to carry out their dreams. One evening, as I sat in the quiet of my apartment, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't my mother. It was my father. His message was simple, "I think it's time we talk." I hadn't heard from him in weeks. I wasn't sure how to feel about this message. Did he finally get it? Did he understand what I had been trying to say? Or was he still trying to pull me back into his world of expectations? I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I wasn't ready to face him, not yet. But I knew I couldn't keep avoiding this conversation forever. There was a part of me that needed closure, that needed to know if there was any chance we could salvage our relationship. I texted back, "When?" He replied almost immediately, "Tomorrow. Come home. We'll talk." The next day, I found myself on a train back to the city. The journey was long, and my mind was filled with 1,000 different thoughts. Would they apologize? Would I even want an apology? Could I forgive them for everything they had put me through? Or was I just walking into another trap, another round of them telling me how I should be? I didn't know what to expect. But I had to do this. I had to face them, to hear what they had to say, and to see if there was a way to heal the wounds that had festered for so long. When I arrived at their house, the door was open, and I could already hear my father's voice inside. I hesitated on the doorstep for a moment, the weight of the decision heavy in my chest. But then I pushed the door open, stepped inside, and saw them sitting there, my mother, sitting in her favorite chair, and my father, standing near the window, his arms crossed as if he was trying to hide the vulnerability I had never seen from him. They both looked up as I entered. The room was quiet, too quiet, and for a moment, I felt like I was walking into an interrogation. But then my father spoke. "Sit down, Min," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. I did, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I met their eyes. My father's gaze was less cold than I remembered, though still guarded. My mother, though, her face was full of uncertainty, something I had never seen from her before. She looked human. For the first time, I saw her as someone who was just as lost as I was. "I'm sorry," my father began, his voice low. "For everything. For not seeing you. For not understanding. We were so focused on your future that we didn't see how we were hurting you." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't ready to forgive him. I wasn't ready to just accept his apology and move on. But I also wasn't sure how to tell him that I needed more than just words. I needed change. Real change. I needed them to see me, not as a project, not as a reflection of their ambitions, but as their son. "I don't need you to apologize," I said quietly. "I just need you to see me. I need you to see me for who I am. Not for what I can do, not for what you think I should be. Just me." My father nodded, though I could tell he didn't fully understand. But for the first time, he wasn't arguing. He wasn't defending his position. He was just listening. And that, in itself, was something I hadn't experienced before. My mother spoke next, her voice barely above a whisper. "Min, I never meant to hurt you. I thought I was helping, pushing you to be better. But I see now. I see now that I didn't give you the love you needed. I gave you everything except that." Her words weren't perfect. They weren't enough to erase the years of pain. But they were real. And they made me realize something important. Maybe, just maybe, they weren't the only ones who had to change. Maybe I had to change, too. We sat there for hours, talking, or at least trying to. There were awkward silences, long pauses, and moments of uncertainty. But for the first time, there was no pressure. No expectations. We were just three people trying to understand each other, trying to rebuild something that had been broken for so long. By the time the conversation ended, I didn't feel like I had all the answers. I didn't feel like everything was fixed. But I did feel something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. I wasn't sure what the future held. I didn't know if I could ever fully forgive them, or if they could ever fully understand me. But I knew that this wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. I left their house that night with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. Maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Maybe I could start living for myself, for the person I had become, not for the person they had wanted me to be. But it wouldn't be easy. And it wouldn't happen overnight. But for the first time in a long time, I was willing to try. And that was enough. I spent the next few weeks trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The conversations with my parents had opened a door, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to walk through it completely. It wasn't just about them, it was about me. About who I was, and who I wanted to be. After that night at my parents' house, I went back to my apartment, but this time, something felt different. It wasn't a sense of guilt or the weight of my past decisions. It was something lighter. The pressure had lifted, at least a little. I wasn't sure if things between me and my parents would ever be perfect. I wasn't sure if I would ever feel completely at home in that family again. But I had begun to understand something crucial: I didn't need their approval to be myself. I began spending more time with myself. I would walk the streets, head clear, heart quieter. I'd look around at the world, the people around me, and wonder if they ever felt like I did, lost, invisible, desperate for something real. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was constantly performing, like I was trying to meet someone else's expectations. I was just living. In those moments, I realized something: I didn't need to be perfect. I didn't need to have all the answers. I didn't need to be the person my parents wanted me to be. I could just be me, with all my flaws, all my mistakes, and that would be enough. A few weeks later, I decided to write a letter. Not to my parents, but to myself. A letter to remind myself of everything I had gone through, and everything I had learned. To remind myself that I had the right to define my own life, my own success, my own happiness. The letter read: to the person I am becoming. I've been on a long journey. A journey where I felt lost, invisible, suffocated by the weight of expectations. I've been running for so long, trying to escape from the person I thought I had to be. But now, I realize something important. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to live up to anyone else's standards. I don't have to follow the path others have laid out for me. I can create my own path, even if it's uncertain. This is my life. And I will live it for me. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. It felt like a promise I had made to myself. A promise that no matter what happened, I would continue moving forward, learning, and becoming the person I was meant to be. A few months passed, and things with my parents slowly began to change. It wasn't instant. We didn't have some dramatic reconciliation, where everything was magically fixed. But we started talking more. They didn't fully understand me, and I didn't fully understand them, but we were trying. And that, I realized, was enough. One evening, my mother called. She asked if I wanted to come over for dinner. I said yes, and when I walked through the door, I was surprised to see that the table was set for 3. There was no mention of my grades, no talk about future plans. Instead, we talked about simple things, what I had been doing, how my days had been. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And that, for once, felt enough. Over time, I learned to stop seeing my parents as villains. They weren't perfect, but they had tried. And even though they had made mistakes, they loved me in their own way. It wasn't the love I had always wanted, but it was the love I had been given. I had learned to stop seeing myself through their eyes. I had learned to stop measuring my worth by how well I performed, by how much I could give them. I was learning to measure my own worth, to define my own success. It was a long, difficult journey, but I was on my way. And maybe, just maybe, that was all that mattered. I still don't know what the future holds. I don't know where my life is headed, or what kind of person I will become. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm moving in the right direction, towards something real, something that's mine. I don't have all the answers. I don't have it all figured out. But I do know this, I'm finally living for me. And that is enough. As I closed the journal, I looked around my small apartment. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally starting to build something that was mine. Something that didn't rely on anyone else's expectations. Maybe that was the real lesson. Maybe the key to finding peace wasn't about fixing everything, but about accepting the imperfections, both in myself and in the people around me. For the first time, I realized I didn't need to be perfect to be loved. And that, in itself, was enough. Thank you for watching this journey unfold here on Bleak Bite. If you found yourself feeling connected, or if something in this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Your thoughts and reactions mean the world, and we'd love to hear what you think. Got a story of your own? A topic you want us to explore next? Drop it in the comments. We're always looking for fresh, raw content that speaks to real experiences, just like today's. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next video. We've got plenty more coming your way, deep dives into the struggles, the questions, and the stories that make us who we are. This is just the beginning, and you won't want to miss what's next. Until then, take care, and we'll see you soon.